Hello, let's talk about The Merchant of Venice, Act 1, Scene 3. Um, when we left, we were in Belmont and we found out about the caskets and the trial to win Portia's hand. Before that, we found out that Bassanio needed some money and Antonio, the Merchant of Venice, said to go out and borrow some. Well, in this scene, we see them getting the money. Before we get into things, let me talk about Venice, the city, back in Shakespeare's day. Venice was the mercantile capital of the world back then, or Europe, which, as far as the Europeans were concerned, was the world. But Venice is where you went to do business. Okay, their whole culture, all the laws were set up around this crazy capitalistic society of making contracts and buying and selling. So this play is The Merchant of Venice. It takes place in, one of the wealthiest cities of Europe, and we've got that whole culture dealing with business. You're going to hear a term every now and then, the Rialto. Just think of the Rialto as Wall Street. Okay. So when Shylock asks, "What's news on the Rialto?" He's like saying, "What's the news on Wall Street? What are the stock market prices? What do I need to know as far as business goes?" All right. So we start off, and Shylock and Bassanio are talking about the loan. We're going to get 3,000 ducats. Now, a ducat is a gold coin, and it would be worth about $350 today. It's a lot of money. So he's going to borrow 3,000 ducats, and he's going to pay it back in 3 months. We find out through the loan, through the argument when Antonio shows up, that there's going to be no interest either. This is really kind of big. Okay. Let me talk about usury. Today, we are familiar with the idea of going to the bank, getting out a loan, and then paying that money back to the bank and adding a little extra for interest. That way the bank can make money. That seems normal to us. Society wouldn't function if we didn't have that. But a long time ago, people didn't use interest. Christians saw this as taking advantage of somebody else. Well, in a lot of cities in Shakespeare's time, people who were Jewish were okay with charging interest. That's usury, charging interest, and they get a little bit of profit. So that's why there's such a big deal about interest between Shylock and Antonio. Let me talk about Shylock in a minute. Shylock is a Jewish character, and Jews were persecuted, I guess. This is before the Holocaust, and today it's not good to make fun of the Jews. It's not good to make fun of anyone. But anti-Semitism or hatred against Jews is something we really frown upon today. And since the Holocaust in World War II, the world's kind of woke up and realized this is bad. We shouldn't be doing this. Before World War II, it was okay to make fun of Jewish people, right? They were the race that lived everywhere, but no one wanted around because they charged interest. Whatever it was, it just seemed like the anti-Semitism was allowed. In Shakespeare's day, this was a comedy, this whole play. Today we look at it as a problem comedy. There are some issues with making fun of someone who's Jewish. But what's interesting is you don't have to look at this as a comedy. You don't have to look at Shylock and say, he's a guy we can laugh at. The links that I've shared with you on the Moodle site to this is to the BBC production. And Warren Mitchell plays Shylock. And Warren Mitchell is a Jew. And as far as I know, this was the first time in the history of the world that a Jewish character played Shylock. And he does a great job bringing Shylock to life, I think. Now, Shylock's character hates the character of Antonio. Okay, and there's some really good reasons for this. We have that famous aside. Let me find that. Get in the right scene. Okay. We have this famous aside when Antonio is coming up and Bassanio introduces him. Here's Signor Antonio. And Shylock steps aside and we hear what he says. And Bassanio and Antonio just kind of disappear for a second. And Shylock says this: "How like a fawning publican he looks. I hate him, for he is a Christian. Look at him. He's coming to borrow something from me. I don't like this guy. He's a Christian." So right there we have this crazy conflict, Judaism versus Christianity. But there's more to it than that. And we get a whole litany of things of why Shylock does not like Antonio. But more for that in low simplicity, he lends out money gratis and brings down the rate of usance. He gives money away for free. He doesn't charge interest. I mean, who's going to come to me for a loan if I'm charging interest when he's not? So that's one reason. If I catch him on the hip, I will feed fat the ancient grudge I bear him. So if I can get the upper hand, I'm going to love this, right? Because I don't like him. He hates our sacred nation. Antonio hates all Jews. And he rails, even there where merchants do congregate, on me, my bargains, and my well-run thrift. Well-won thrift. So Shylock is being persecuted by Antonio. And when they're doing business, Antonio yells at him for doing things wrong. He curses my tribe, right? So Antonio curses Shylock and all Jewish people. We will hear later that Shylock is called dog by Antonio. Shylock is spit upon by Antonio. Okay? So Shylock has a lot of good reasons to hate Antonio. It goes beyond Christian-Jewish conflict. Antonio's a jerk to him. Spits on him, calls him names, and makes fun of him at his place of business. So we have that little aside, and we see Shylock doesn't like Antonio, and then they get back into the conversation. And they make the deal. And this deal is kind of interesting. Shylock and Antonio hate each other, but yet they're going to agree to this bargain. Put yourself in either one of their shoes. Would you make a deal where you're loaning and borrowing $3,000 to someone who you don't like because they call you names, they spit on you, they've hated your whole religion? Would you do that? Both of these people, Shylock and Antonio, are going to go into this agreement. Would you accept the agreement? Earlier I mentioned there was a catch. Did you understand the catch? If Antonio does not pay back 3,000 ducats in 3 months, Shylock gets to cut out a pound of Antonio's flesh. He could cut it out anywhere, right? A heart, a lung, a liver. He gets to cut it out. Okay. They've agreed to this. This is a Shakespearean play. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Antonio's money is going to come back in time for him to pay back Shylock? And that's where we are. Reread the agreement. Reread how Antonio and Shylock deal with each other. And put yourselves in their position. Could you do this?